For most of us, Vietnam arrived secondhand. It comes through a war we watched on television or read about in school, through films and documentaries that, however well-intentioned, were almost never made by Vietnamese people. Through a single story told from one direction with the same cast of characters every time. And so we end up knowing the name of a country without really knowing the country at all. This trip is built around that gap. Over 16 days, we'll travel the length of Vietnam, from the old northern capital of Hanoi down through the limestone country of Hoa Lu, along the central coast to Hoi An and Hue, and finally into Saigon in the south. We'll eat the food the rest of the world has been quietly borrowing from for decades, and we'll meet the people. We'll walk through the places whose names we already know and discover that almost everything we thought we knew about them was either incomplete or pointed in the wrong direction. I'm Gordon Dreger, founder of Wheel and Anchor. I'd like to show you the Vietnam that doesn't usually make it into our living rooms back home. Hanoi is the older of Vietnam's two big cities by a long way, and travelers who come here tend to fall into two camps: those who fall for Hanoi and those who prefer Saigon, nowadays known as Ho Chi Minh City. By the end of this trip, you'll know which camp you're in. We'll give ourselves 4 nights here because Hanoi is the kind of city that doesn't open up on a single afternoon. It rewards the slow look. On our first full day, we go straight to the heart of the country's modern story. We pay our respects to Ho Chi Minh, or Uncle Ho as he's called here, his preserved body lying in the mausoleum he never wanted. We also take in the one-pillar pagoda and the Temple of Literature, founded in 1070 as Vietnam's first university. From there, we wander the Old Quarter. We'll eat lunch and visit Phan Phuc Village, which has been making silk for roughly 1,000 years. And we stop in at Vun Art, a small workshop that trains people with disabilities to turn discarded textiles into bags and wallets. It's a model you see more and more of in this part of the world, travelers meeting residents in a way that actually moves something forward. But here's a fact. Vietnam isn't just one people, it's 54. And as Canadians, we understand instinctively how national identity and ethnic heritage can sit alongside each other. But it's an easy thing to forget when you travel. The Museum of Ethnology in Hanoi will be our reminder. 54 ethnic groups, 6 language families, a country far more layered than the maps suggest. Later that evening, we go to a water puppet show, an art form that started in the 11th century, performed by farmers who needed a way to entertain themselves between rice harvests. Lacquered puppets, a screen of water, a story sung overhead. It's strange and beautiful, and very specifically Vietnamese. And Vietnamese cuisine is one of the great cuisines of the world, and Hanoi is one of the great food cities of Asia. So we give ourselves a full day to eat our way through it. Pho is the one everybody knows, though almost nobody at home pronounces it right. It's pho, not pho. And then there's bun cha, grilled pork, rice noodles, herbs, and a warm broth that almost puts to shame every other lunch you've had this year. There's a family that's been roasting peanuts on the same corner for generations, a donut stall with the mung bean and coconut filling that you'll think about long after the trip is over. And egg coffee. Yes, egg coffee. A Hanoi invention from 1946 when milk was scarce and someone reached for the next best thing. By the end of the day, you'll be full, but you will also understand something about this country that no museum can teach you. From Hanoi, we drive about 2 hours south into the province now officially called Hoa Lu, what older maps still label Ninh Binh. This is the Red River Delta, rice paddies stretching to the horizon, broken up by towering pinnacles of limestone that rise straight out of the green like something out of a Chinese landscape painting. We'll spend 2 nights here, and they are the quiet heart of the trip. On the first day, we'll board a sampan, a small flat-bottomed rowboat, and glide through the Trang An Landscape Complex, a UNESCO site. The river takes us into a series of caves named Sang, Toi, Ba Giot, and others that are hard to get your tongue around. We come out into hidden valleys ringed by cliffs, and we'll visit the Bic Dong Pagoda, climbing 100 steps through a cave full of statues and incense to a view that you'll struggle to describe afterward. On the second day, we get up early, really early, to be on the water at Van Long Nature Reserve before 7 in the morning. Van Long is the largest mangrove reserve in the northern delta. 457 plant species and rare animals, including the red-faced monkey. And at first light, with the mist still on the karsts, it might be one of the most peaceful places you will ever be. We'll also see the continent's largest gilded bronze Buddha, and for those who wish, a visit to a remarkable 19th century Catholic cathedral of all things. It was built by a Vietnamese priest who blended European church architecture with traditional Vietnamese pagoda design. We then hop a short flight down to Da Nang, the commercial center of central Vietnam, and take a short drive on to Hoi An. Hoi An is a UNESCO World Heritage Town, and one of the very few places in Vietnam that came through the 20th century essentially untouched. From the 17th to the 19th centuries, it was one of the busiest ports in Asia. Chinese, Japanese, Dutch, Portuguese, and French traders all kept houses here. The 400-year-old Japanese bridge still stands. The old merchant houses are still lived in. The town just barely stopped being important enough to bomb. And so what we have is a small miracle, a working town that still looks the way it looked 3 centuries ago. Over our 3 nights here, we walked the back streets, visiting one of the old merchant homes and learning how the famous silk lanterns are made. We'll even get to try our hand at making one to take home. We'll go out to Troc Huê village, where we'll get to give a helping hand to farmers who have been growing the herbs that define Vietnamese cuisine on the same plots for generations. From there, we cycle to the market, meet a cooking coach, and head off to a local cooking school by boat to prepare and eat what we've gathered. From Hoi An, we drive north to Hue over the Hai Van Pass, Pass of the Clouds, named for the great mist that rises off the South China Sea to greet the road. It is one of the great drives in Southeast Asia. Hue is the old imperial capital. For a century and a half, the emperors of the Nguyen dynasty lived inside the walls of the imperial citadel, in an inner sanctum modeled on the Forbidden City in Beijing, and called here the Forbidden Purple City. But the city is much older than that. Hue has been settled since the 1st century of the Common Era. There are ruins here from the 4th century. This place has seen empires come and go, and in 1968, during the Tet Offensive, it saw something very close to its own destruction. The Battle of Hue lasted 3 months. The Viet Cong held parts of the city, the South Vietnamese army held others. The Americans bombed all of it. Of the original 160 buildings in the citadel, only 10 survived, and you can still see the bullet holes. We'll take a slow boat ride along the perfumed river, named for the scent of autumn flowers as they fall into the water. And then, again, there's the food. Hue's cuisine is the cuisine of the old royal court. Finer, more elaborate, more particular than anything else in the country. Bo Bun Hue, beef noodle soup that is to pho what a tailored suit is to a t-shirt, was invented here. And then, finally, we fly the last leg south. Saigon, officially Ho Chi Minh City and locally just HCM, is a city of about 8 million people, and quite frankly, it is one of the coolest cities in Southeast Asia. If Hanoi is the old soul of Vietnam, Saigon is its fast-talking, well-dressed, espresso-drinking younger sibling. 4 nights here, and we'll need every one of them. The day after arrival, we go to the War Remnants Museum. Now, I want to prepare you for this one because it's not an easy morning. The museum tells us the story of what is here called the American War, the same war we grew up calling the Vietnam War, but told from the Vietnamese side. The difference in perspective from what we are used to hearing and seeing in Hollywood movies is striking. And lest anyone be tempted to dismiss it as propaganda, there is overwhelming physical, photographic, and testimonial evidence to back up what's on the walls. Let me put it gently. The version of this story we grew up with, the one we got from the films and the magazines and the evening news, is not the version the rest of the world saw, and it's certainly not the version the Vietnamese lived. The museum also documents the French War, the First Indo-Chinese War, which kind of gives some context how the Americans ended up here in the first place. It's a tough morning, but it is in many ways the morning the whole trip has been pointing toward. The next day, we drive out of the city to the Cu Chi tunnels, the underground network the Viet Cong used to move beneath the Americans and the staging ground for the 1968 Tet Offensive. You can crawl into a short section of tunnel if you want to feel what it was like, or you can stand outside and listen to the guide explain exactly how a peasant army outlasted the most powerful military in the world. And back in the city, we visit one of Saigon's famous apartment cafes, the kind built inside old residential blocks, and learn about Vietnam's coffee culture from a barista who lives and breathes it. Vietnam is the second largest coffee exporter in the world. The way they drink it here is a small art form. And in the evening, if the schedule lines up, we'll catch a show at the Saigon Opera House. And on our last full day, the city is yours. Walk, eat, shop, sit in a cafe, and watch the motorbikes flow past like a river. There is no wrong way to spend a free day in Saigon. We'll come back together that evening for our farewell dinner. People come back from Vietnam changed, not in some big dramatic way. They just perceive it differently in their heads than they did before they left. They've eaten the food the country invented, they've crawled through the caves and seen the museum that tells the other side of the war, and they've learned to say pho properly. And the narrow lens we often arrive with, the one most of us arrive with, is replaced by something broader and more honest and way more interesting. That's what this trip is for. I hope you'll join us.